Thank you. Okay, we must be almost at 6:29. It says on my computer, but I'll take that as 6:30. Good evening and welcome to Hackney's Planning Committee. My name is Councillor Vincent Stopps and I shall be chairing this evening's meeting. The Council will be recording and broadcasting the meeting this evening on YouTube. We'll undertake the meetings as close to the fashion as we can to our normal format. The virtual meeting technology does have a chat function, but we use it for no other purpose than raising technology issues. It's not being monitored by me for questions or anything like that. When your camera is turned on during the meeting, please ensure that you're visible. Participants who have registered their interest to speak at the meeting should only speak when they're invited to by me. If we have any disruption, there is the possibility of you being switched off and removed from the meeting. Please don't get into that position. In the event of an internet outage, the meeting will be adjourned and we will try and re-establish ourselves later. If any committee members are unable to stay in the meeting and participate fully, then they will have to tell us, and they'll be unable to vote on the matter. So unless you just sort of slip out for 30 seconds and rejoin, you know, we really will need to consider your voting rights if you have to leave. I'm going to ask members now to introduce themselves, and I'll start with Councillor Hanson.
Councillor Katie Hanson, Vice Chair of the Planning Committee.
Councillor Chauhan. Councillor, can't hear you.
Sorry, Councillor AJ Jahan, Hagston Ward Councillor.
Welcome. This is your first meeting as a substantive member, AJ. Councillor Snell.
Councillor Peter Snell.
Steve.
Councillor Steve Race, Hudson East and Shoreditch Ward.
And going down to the bottom, Brian, please.
Councillor Brian Bell.
Claire Potter.
Councillor Claire Potter.
And Claire Joseph.
Councillor Claire Joseph, Victoria
Okay.
Ward.
Do shout at me if I get the Claires mixed up or forget to identify you properly. We've also got the head of planning with us, Natalie, our legal officer, Sam, and the government service officer, Gareth, whom some of you will have spoken to, and other planning officers, transport officers, helpers and advisors this evening. Before moving on to the agenda, I'll take 2 minutes to explain how the meeting will proceed. We'll hear each application summarised by the officers, a 5-minute statement from the objector, and a 5-minute statement from the applicants. Members will then be free to ask questions. It's my role as chair to make sure that members have all the information they need to make a decision, objectors and applicants have their say, and that the meeting runs properly. I'll not be taking any contribution from the floor. It's a meeting. It's a public meeting. It's a meeting in public, not a public meeting. You must have given notice to governance services before the meeting and registering to speak. As I've said, objectors and applicants will have strictly 5 minutes. If there's more than one of you, then you need to work out how you're going to divvy that 5 minutes up. Members are not representing either their wards nor their political parties. We make our decisions on the basis of any site visits we've made, what we've read in the reports, and of course what we hear this evening. We must only take account of policies adopted by this council, other material planning policies and material planning considerations. Can I emphasise that members cannot discuss nor take account of non-material planning matters? Members making the decision should not have allowed themselves to have prejudged any application prior to the meeting. Similarly, if they have any interest in the application site or all the people involved, they should declare that interest and may remove themselves from the decision. When we've finished our deliberations, we'll vote on the recommendation. I'll describe the voting procedure before we vote. When the decision's made, that's the end of the matter of the committee. The applicant may appeal a decision to the Secretary of State. Objectors may seek legal redress. I'd advise you to seek professional advice in either case. Finally, we're asked to take a break it looks like I'll be taking a break probably after the first item. That will just be for 5 minutes, and then we will hopefully go on to the end, because we've got a second substantive item and then a smaller item at the end of that. So I think that's how it'll work, but we'll have to see how it goes. I do want to give people a chance to stretch their legs and have a cup of tea or something. Now we'll move on to the agenda. And we've first on the agenda, we've got apologies for absence. We do have a late apology from Councillor Levy. I don't think there are any more, Gareth.
No, that's it. Councillor Levy only.
Are there any declarations of interest at all? No. Okay, going on to the minutes of the previous meeting, I've read them and contributed to them before, and I'm okay with them. Anybody else got any issues with the minutes? No. Okay, so I'll virtually sign them, and well, perhaps in a few months' time, actually, I'll have a grand signing session as we get back to the town hall. So the first item is the well, I call it the Citizens Advice Bureau, across from the town hall, 234 to 238 Mare Street. We've got Maggie, so we'll hear officers and then your 5 minutes, and then we've got the applicants coming back after that for 5 minutes. Okay, Nick, over to you.
Okay. Everyone see that?
Yes, that's okay.
Brilliant. I've got my laser pointer on.
Oh.
So the site's located on the eastern side of Mare Street at the junction with Paragon Road on the southeastern corner of the Town Hall Square within the conservation area. To the north is the Hackney Picture House, to the west is the Central Library, and to the east is the Urswick School. This is viewed towards the site, looking south. It contains a 3-storey building in Class E use, formerly a Citizens Advice Bureau at the ground floor with ancillary offices above. The building was refronted and extended in the Edwardian period. It was constructed alongside the rest of the 3-storey Grade 2 listed Georgian terrace that it abuts to the south. As such, the internal arrangement and rear of the property date to an earlier period than the frontage. The somewhat awkward relationship between the original building and the refronted elements can be seen in this view. A new residential building faces Paragon Road to the rear of the site and shown to the left here. The application is for a new mansard roof extension and a pair of 2-storey houses facing Paragon Road. Overall, the scheme would provide 9 residential units above a ground floor office use. This slide shows the Grade 2 listed terrace to the south along Mare Street. This slide shows the new building to the rear of the site and also the end of the Urswick School grounds. There's a gated alley between the site and these. These are the floor plans for the proposal. As is laid out in the committee report, the proposed standard of accommodation for both commercial and residential occupiers is considered good. Top left is the ground floor with the office in the main building and the lower floor of the 2 proposed houses facing Paragon Road. The office floor space would be relatively narrow with large windows giving good outlook and daylighting. It would be suitable for a small business and is considered likely to find a tenant. The garden to the rear is communal, though there is private amenity space for the 2 houses as well. The cycle store can be seen at the end of the garden, away from the existing trees. An objection has raised the issue of whether the alley to the rear may be used by the residents of this building. It can be seen running alongside the site in this drawing. If I show you here. There. While the ownership of the alley is a civil matter and wouldn't form a reason for refusal, for the sake of completeness, we note that there's an existing door in the boundary wall from this property to the alley, and also that the garden and proposed cycle store can be accessed directly from the main building in the front entrance here. The top right and bottom left show the first and second floors. Note that the arrangement of the residential units is the same in the main building at each floor, providing 3 one-bedroom residential units at each. That's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. When the scheme came in for pre-app, a number of possible arrangements of this floor were considered, and this was found to be the optimal balance between the proposed quality of accommodation and the retention of the heritage floor plan and window arrangement along with the Georgian rear elevation. We note that the middle unit on each floor is slightly undersized measured against the national standards, being 2.2 square metres short of the 50 square metre target. Nevertheless, all of the units are dual aspect, well lit and well laid out, providing a good standard of accommodation. As such, despite the marginal shortfall, they're considered acceptable in this respect. On the bottom right is the 3-bedroom unit proposed within the mansard, with its private terrace here facing the garden. In design and conservation terms, the proposal is considered acceptable for this conservation area location and heritage building. The Mayor Street elevation of the building shows the impact of the mansard. During the course of the application, it was amended to reduce its height and also to hip this element here. Previously, it was labelled like that. This lessens the impact and reflects the fact that the existing raised facade of the building already differentiates it from the terrace, and that a mansard is unlikely to be successfully proposed for the listed buildings along here. The main change to the rear elevation is the removal of 2 outriggers. These are original but are not considered to be of high significance, and their removal is considered acceptable, improving outlook from the rear windows and increasing the available area for the communal garden. The Paragon Road elevation helps show why there would be no significant amenity impact on neighbouring occupiers. The proposed 2-storey houses run against the blank wall of the adjacent building here and don't exceed its depth. The mansard is set well in from the sides behind a parapet. An objection was received in relation to overlooking from the top floor private terrace to the rear of the mansard. As can be seen, there are already rear-facing windows in the building, as well as neighbouring buildings, providing a similar outlook to the view from the terrace, so there wouldn't be a significant degree of additional overlooking as a result of the proposal. This image shows the rear elevation of the 2 houses and a section of the main building. Since adoption of the Hackney Local Plan 2033, minor schemes of less than 10 units have become applicable for repayment in lieu towards affordable housing. Unilateral undertaking attached to this application therefore ensures that the scheme is policy compliant in respect of affordable housing, providing the payment of £450,000. The legal agreement also requires the scheme to be car-free and to provide a payment for the carbon offsetting of the development. This is the proposal as a CGI. The site is very well served by public transport. As well as being car-free, office and residential cycle parking is provided in line with Hackney standards. Blue badge holders are eligible to park free of charge in the pay and display bays on Paragon Road adjacent. And again, you can see the housing and the mansard in this view. The existing trees would be retained in the rear landscaped. Bird and bat boxes would be placed at eaves level to the rear. So to conclude, the proposed application is considered to be policy compliant. It brings a heritage building in a sensitive location back into repair and productive use while providing good quality commercial floor space and 9 new residential units. As is detailed in the committee report, in these and other respects, the scheme is considered acceptable. It's recommended for approval subject to conditions in the unilateral undertaking.
Thank you.
Do you want me to stop presenting or?
You can leave that picture up there. That's useful, I think. Yes. So Maggie, please.
Thank you. I've been living at the property since 2016, and it hasn't been Citizens Advice Bureau for a very long time. And the council has been receiving some part of the rent through this property. So it hasn't been unoccupied since then. It has been used for residential purposes. We recently found out about the building survey from 2015, which made remarks about the hazard state of the property. To be honest, from what I see from that report, the property should have never been made available to public for residential purposes. Instead, it should have been protected and improved rather than being neglected since then. I love history. The house sits at a conservation area, neighboring listed houses, terraced houses, sharing walls. Therefore, I did some research and found some photos from early 1900s that show a unity in the area. It also shows how the beautiful houses across the street were replaced with the council's ugly grey building. The increase in the scale affects the whole area. I noticed a statutory notice ordered in 13th May 2019 that the previous changes affect the setting of the conservation area and the development affect a public right-of-way. The new building with the brickworks creates an alien change to the conservation area. Roof extension seems like a decision for financial reasons to earn more money from the property, but what this property needs is love and protection. As some of you know, the property was left flooded in summer by the council for some time, which caused ceiling tiles on the ground floor to fall, which revealed some patterns on the roof and on the walls. There is also a covered window between 236 and 238, and an old metal lamp holder hanging from the ceiling. This property survived the world wars. It is situated as a conservation area, shares a wall with a listed property. Therefore, its scale, bricks, the character must be protected. There are also fireplaces in the property. So not only the outside, but the details and the inside of the property must be surveyed and well assessed before taking any decisions. Therefore, I take some actions for this property to be considered for being listed property. The changes to the character, fabric, and scale of the property will affect the council since 1989, and I still cannot understand the reasons why it has been neglected for so long. And I believe the property must be kept exactly as it is. It must be regarded as a part of an artistic piece in Hackney's conservation area that needs to be protected and not be seen as a source of greedy financial income. The rear part of the property, the changes to the ground floor, the extension and the additional floor on the roof is out of character, as this property also a part of the picture, a part of the conservation area. The unity and the character must be preserved. I also would like to mention that Hackney Society planning groups submitted observations must be taken into account because they put lots of details about the bricks in the property. And the supporters from supporters Ashley Cook and Carlotta Jansen from Weston Williams will be receiving financial income from the changes to this property, and I think their support should be taken into account when we are listening to their support for the change of this property.
Thank you very much indeed. So Ashley and Carlotta, do you want to say something to us?
Hi, Councillor Stock. Can you hear me?
I can, Ashley.
Yes. I'm going to go first and then hand over to Carlotta, if that's okay.
Okay. Yeah.
So just want to say thank you, Chair, and thank you to the planning team for presenting the proposals this evening. As the planning consultant for the proposed development on this site, we're pleased to be representing this fantastic development opportunity and to be part of bringing this underutilised building back into use. The property at 234 to 238 Mayor Street has a complex history. It was historically used as a citizens' advice bureau, as you're all aware, briefly as a training centre, but since falling vacant, it was temporarily occupied by squatters and has more recently been secured by property guardians whilst the future redevelopment of the building was considered. The applicant and design team have been considering proposals on the site since 2016, where we first entered into pre-application discussions with Hackney Council. During the last 5 years, detailed pre-application discussions have been carried out with the planning and design team at Hackney to establish the best development solution for the site. The property is extremely well located, and thanks to its location only a 7-minute walk from London Fields and Hackney Central stations, it boasts the highest public transport accessibility rating of 6B. The proposed development responds to planning policy requirements by providing the reconfiguration and extension of this vacant building and the construction of 2 family houses and the conversion of the upper parts to 7 flats with new office space at ground floor. The development is accompanied by cycle parking facilities for all residents to help encourage new residents to travel sustainably. Outdoor amenity space is also provided at the rear of the property for all residents, with private gardens and terraces for the family housing. Overall, it's considered that the proposed development provides high quality residential accommodation, as well as the office floor space at the ground floor. Given the highly sustainable nature of the location, we're helping to bring a vacant and underutilised building back into use. Not only do the proposals make the best use of the site through the new uses proposed, but the design and architectural quality of the building improves the contribution of the site to the wider conservation area. I'm now going to pass on to the architect, Carlotta, who's going to speak more about the design of the proposal.
Thanks, Ashley. As mentioned, the proposal refurbishes the site of 234 to 238 Mare Street to bring an underutilised building back into active use, providing 9 new homes and new office space to activate the frontage along Paragon Road and Mare Street on the prominent corner opposite the Town Hall Square. We've worked closely with Hackney Council's planning team through a PPA process where we presented sketchbooks of the emerging design. 2 pre-application meetings were held to gain feedback from the planning and heritage team early in the design process. It was agreed through these meetings that refurbishment of the existing building with side and roof extensions would be an acceptable way to progress the design and seen as a positive design solution in townscape terms while still respecting the building heritage. 6 one-bedroom, 2-person homes are located within the original building envelope, making the most efficient use of the existing partitions, staircases and windows to provide high-quality dual-aspect units whilst retaining the key heritage features that are unique to this building and its history. The Paragon Road frontage is filled in to positively connect the proposal with the adjacent development at the old ambulance station site, providing 2 3-bedroom, 5-person houses as a 2-storey infill. The scale and proportions of this frontage act as a transition between the larger proportions of the existing building and the more contemporary design of the adjacent homes. An additional 3-bedroom, 5-person unit is located within a zinc-clad mansard roof extension on top of the existing building. The new extensions provide valuable family homes within a central location meeting modern space standards. The proposal is intended to preserve and enhance the retained original building and facade, allowing it to make a more positive contribution to the character of the conservation area than the existing buildings that stand on the site. In particular, we have sought to improve the relationship of the buildings to the street, as the existing shop fronts and ground floor treatment are not in keeping with the quality of the rest of the retained buildings.
That's 1 minute left.
Our design principles were based on dealing with 2 conditions making up the proposal: the refurbishment and the new extensions. We use modern detailing and materiality to articulate the new additions and use traditional detailing within the existing elements such as the shop fronts, which reference the original shop front design based on archive images. A clearer ground floor arrangement has been proposed, clearly identifying the residential and commercial access, and the residential communal access door leads through a generous lobby and continues through to a communal landscaped courtyard and second stair core. The external space provides new usable amenity space for residents as well as a positive visual amenity. In conclusion, we've worked closely with the planning officers to deliver the best scheme for the site, balancing the heritage and viability requirements of the site, maximising the number of units and commercial space, whilst respecting the key heritage features of the existing building, both externally and internally. Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed. Yes, so okay, members, we've started putting hands up and doing it in that manner. So please, if you do that, if you've got questions. Katie, I saw your hand first.
Thanks very much indeed, Chair. I just wondered if I could ask about the Hackney Society's suggestion that the new houses fronting Paragon Road could match those. I mean, I can see that the facade is a continuation, but the Hackney Society's suggestion is that they essentially have matching bricks and are seen as an extension of those rather than as belonging to the, what I guess we could call the host building.
I could take this, but maybe I'll pass it through to Matt, because there is a sense in which this is quite a fine detail on the screen. Matt?
Yes, this is something that we have, obviously we've seen the comment, and it's something that we have discussed. And our take on it is that it's better to have it as a link block that has something different going on, but whilst still complementing both the buildings, so it doesn't all merge into one. So we feel that this variegated brick is the better option to sort of break it up a bit.
Clearly, there'll be details provided at the next stage according to the condition that's on there. So we will see the bricks when they come in.
Thank you, Claire Potter.
Sorry, Chair, did you say me?
Yes.
Mine was possibly more of a comment, but I notice in terms of the sustainability credentials of this development, you talk about retrofitting the house, the main building, and I just wanted to seek assurance that, you'd be taking a kind of whole house approach so that, you know, very much the energy demand is minimised as much as possible. And the other comment I just wanted to say is that I appreciate the £450,000 to affordable housing off-site, but I do think it's a shame that, you know, a social housing unit or units couldn't have been incorporated, because the council very much supports mixed tenure housing. So it's a shame that we cannot find a way of doing it on these small sites. So a comment on that also would be appreciated.
Thank you. Please, Nick.
So in terms of the affordable housing, I think until recently, until LP33, we weren't getting anything on a site of this size. This is 9 units, so it would have fallen completely by the wayside in terms of affordable housing. Now we do get a payment in lieu, but it's recognised that on small sites, there aren't any housing providers that want to take on 1 unit, 2 units in something of this size. So until the council starts doing it itself, there isn't any means by planning would do that rather than a payment in lieu. And it's policy compliant for that reason. In terms of the sustainability, one of the things that the unilateral undertaking does is it gets the carbon offset payment and it puts that in. That obviously is a minor scheme. Until recently, the carbon offset was not something that was taken care of either, but this is something that the unilateral undertaking that's been brought in also takes. So that's £32,000 as well for offsetting the carbon. And there are other conditions on there as well.
Offsetting the carbon on site?
That's right, yeah. So
I mean, I appreciate that comment. Sorry, Vincent.
How does that work then? You take money off of them and give them back to put it in a...
Well, it's a payment to us. I see what you mean by on-site, in the sense that it's the carbon offset is representing the site itself. But no, it does. We don't give it back to them in order to then put it into. Yeah. It's what they can't do on-site, basically, as represented by their energy statement with the application. Then goes into other methods.
The expectation is that we can ask them to insulate, let's say, all the building, not just the new elements to it.
Right. So the energy statement goes into the detail of what they plan to do, and that's all in the submission. But then what they haven't managed to get it to carbon zero, then that is an offset payment, and that goes elsewhere.
Okay, but they look to do all the building if they can. They don't just do the roof spaces of the new roof, for example.
Right. Yeah. So they're basically, the carbon offsetting essentially acts as a carrot to make it as carbon neutral as they possibly can make it.
Okay.
Because they have to pay money for everything that they can't do throughout the building.
Okay. I think I get you. Thank you. Carlotta. So Carlotta, what have you done to the rest of the building in terms of energy saving, as opposed to just the new elements of it?
Yeah, just to kind of follow up on that, actually. So the office space would be seeking to be BREEAM excellent. So this is something that's captured as part of the energy strategy, as mentioned by Nick. In terms of so we're looking at kind of the building fabric and the mechanical ventilation and heat recovery as well. It is a bit more difficult to get the kind of fabric performance where we need it to be for the existing building, as it's a refurbishment of the existing. So we've had to rely more on the kind of energy provision. So air source heat pumps is what we're looking at, which is considered a more sustainable energy source. So that's what we're looking at for the kind of whole development. And in terms of the fabric performance, that would be better in the new extensions. So as a balance, we've had to kind of look at the whole scheme. And as Nick mentioned, there would be an offset payment for where we're not meeting the 100% carbon offset.
Thank you. Claire, does that respond to?
It's a bit disappointing, really, because actually this is a great opportunity to look at the fabric, and air source heat pumps are, I mean, I can see that they are a solution, but if everybody had air source heat pumps and we didn't address the fabric first, or generation electricity just wouldn't be able to cope. So it's not sufficient to just rely on putting in air source heat pumps. We need to really look at how we retrofit the whole house. And my other comment about the affordable housing element is, I understand it is a council that is a developer for this application. So if the council can't lead by example and have social housing units as part of, you know, a mixed development, who can? I mean, it's, you know,
Claire, we would like to be the council's regeneration function, but we're not. We are the planning department or the planning authority, and so we treat them as if they are any other developer in this respect.
Okay.
So, you know, David Mitchell might want to come in at the end, and we can ask him that. But strictly speaking, that's, you know, something they will have looked to do, irrespective of planning, and there's no planning control on it if they choose not to do. So, can I just get Carlotta to come? Carlotta, Claire is suggesting that you know, to some degree you haven't looked at or you may not have looked at the fabric of the building. Can you tell us why? I suspect you might have, and you've decided you couldn't do much to that. Is that right?
Well, we haven't actually looked at the kind of wall build-ups in any detail at this stage.
Okay.
It is something that we would look at kind of at the next detailed design stage. I'm not saying that there wouldn't be any scope to improve the building fabric. At the moment, we've just kind of used the existing wall build-ups in terms of the kind of planning of the spaces. And where possible, things like the kind of roof, that would obviously be renewed to take on the roof extension. So the roof build-up will subsequently be improved, which will also then therefore improve the building performance. So that is something that we would be looking at the next stage. But at this stage, no details have been provided that in the planning submission.
So in theory, you could take that 32,000 that you're going to give to the council, or give to the sustainability part of the council, and use that, I don't know, for interior cladding or what have you. Is that how it works?
I'm not sure if I can answer that.
No, that's not how it works.
That's not how it works. Okay.
People don't apply to it directly. In order to find out exactly how the money that is spent on carbon offsetting, that would be a question that we could put another time. But no, it won't be going back into this site. And this amount of money is getting a lot bigger all the time. So it's going to be a very big pot following the changes made in the recent London plan. So.
Okay. It's an interesting point Claire's made, I think. Claire Joseph, please.
Hello, good evening. Well, I would echo Claire's point there about the affordable housing. I mean, it's a council building and it has historically been a council building. So not to be able to get even one council home on site, I just think it's pretty appalling, really. I mean, we keep taking these contributions, but where are we meant to build the affordable housing? You know, with these contributions, we must get it on site. And I would ask, who have we asked to manage it? Why can't we manage it as a council? I always ask it and I never really get an answer, but I don't understand why we can't manage council homes in that building.
Okay, John.
It doesn't meet our housing policies at all.
David, can you respond to that?
Hi, yes. With regard to on-site affordable housing, the council is right. If we went for on-site affordable housing, we could probably get one unit in terms of the viability of the scheme. So we felt that it was very important to have a fully planning policy compliant scheme coming to committee in terms of off-site contributions. But it is a council building, and outside of the planning process, we are talking with the housing department about how best to achieve affordable housing with regards to this scheme. We've got 2 3-bedroom houses on the site, which would be much better than any of the flats within the building. And so we're talking to the housing service about how best to use the contribution, whether to use essentially turn that contribution into 1 or 2, depending on how the finances work, on-site contribution, or whether they've got a particular use for that £450,000, sorry, that they feel is what's the phrase I'm looking for? It's better for the council overall to perhaps use that money somewhere else. But those discussions are still ongoing with the housing service, and but we really did want to show that we can meet the full policy with regard to on-site contributions, because I think a lot of private developers don't. So that was all I had to say about that point. I can take any other questions.
I think Sam's going to come and tell us that's nothing to do with planning. Is that right, Sam?
Largely to echo what I think has already been said, but that while councillors are more than entitled to express disappointment about a certain issue, in this case, no on-site provision, they can't allow that expression of an opinion to taint the decision itself. And in this case, what officers have reported is a policy compliant proposal.
Thank you. Okay, Steve, please.
Thank you, Chair. I want to put on record my disappointment that it's not on site as well in that case. Could I ask a couple of questions around the provision? It's not made clear, but I assume, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that these are for private renting. Doesn't seem to be clear in the papers. In terms of the affordable housing, was any or is any discussions being given to anything around London living rent levels of rent for these, if that is the case? And then I've just got two more questions. I just wanted to clarify could I just check that the dormer aspect has been, I think this was right, it has been reduced, and that's not reflected obviously in the Hackney Society comments that are in the paper, so the height of it has been reduced subsequently to the original plan. And I was also going to question what seems to be a lack of outdoor amenity for the flats. There's a communal courtyard, I think, but not much more than that. Could someone kind of go into that design aspect a bit more, please? Thank you.
Nick, please, both of those, I think.
Yes, no problem. So beginning at the end, seeing as that's the last thing that came up, the communal courtyards, well, that's how much space there is on the site. You wouldn't get any more space than that. There is private space for the 3 beds, so that's 2 houses have a little private yard at the back. There's a private terrace at the back behind the mansard, and then the communal courtyard is the space that's left on the site. And a lot of places don't have it. It's a conversion. And it's also a minor scheme. This is something that I actually see as a benefit of the scheme rather than something that would go against it, because it's good that it's there, basically. In terms of the height of the mansard, yeah, it was reduced. It wasn't really policy compliant, and we agreed with the Hackney Society that it didn't really help the appearance of the building, that the mansard was shaped the way it was, so we got it reduced in height, and we think it was better like that. Just as an aside, there was a question also from the Hackney Society about the colour of the mansard, so we'd have asked just to see what that would look like in reality when it comes to us as a sample later on. That's part of the condition. So it may change or it may not, depending on whether we're convinced at the next stage. And then the last section, the last question, I think, was about whether it's going to be renting or sales. It's not really come up as a planning consideration, so I don't know what David's thinking, but we've got a housing mix that we're happy with. Whether it's rental or sale at the next stage is sort of up to property services, I suppose. I don't know if David wants to comment, if he knows already.
Yeah, that's part of the conversations that we're having with the housing service about whether there is the potential of putting the whole scheme into Hackney's PRS company, a housing living rent level, but at the risk of stepping outside planning again. Those discussions are ongoing, and we're trying to find out, we're trying to work out between us what is best in terms of regeneration and housing provision, whether it's on-site or off-site. So those conversations are happening outside of the planning system.
Thank you, Peter. I can see Claire as well. Peter.
Thank you, Chair. I want to make comments on 2 things that have been said already, but then get on to my questions, but give me a moment. First of all, substantial change like this to a building, I believe, mentioning what Claire Potter said, require that the any element of the building is brought up to current building regulation standards. I don't think you can do this level of change without actually doing substantial internal cladding to massively improve the heat loss from the building. So if you don't get it right, we've just reported to building control outside of our role as planning committee members. And the other thing is that I do respect our social housing providers. But when we talk about good places for social housing, which is primarily family housing, that's the greatest need in the borough, this is pretty damn terrible. It's on a busy, busy corner, and it's not an ideal place for social housing. So I love the idea of mixed development, but this is a different location. Now let me get them. So I'd be keen to give an opportunity for Maggie to come back to us, because this is a magnificent terrace. One of my favourite little gems in Hackney is the building on the far end of that terrace, which is a two-way facing building. If ever you go down that street, just take a look at it. It is absolutely beautiful. And so it's a total loss that they've messed this up in Edwardian times. But I think we're all accepting, and I just want to check with Maggie that we don't do retrofit. We respect our heritage, and so therefore the idea that we're respecting that crappy conversion by the Edwardians is consistent with what the Hackney Society would like. I'd like then to pick up with the comments that she made and put them to Tim or to Matt. If there are important internal features, surely we should be looking after those features. We do own this property. What is the intention? Are we going to rescue, reuse them? Are they going to be incorporated in the new development? Which, again, may be a constraint on what I've talked about in retrofitting to environmental standards. And then the last thing really is for Carlotta. I mean, this looks a fantastic upgrade to that corner, because let's face it, it's looked a total mess for decades. And are we really going to deliver it? Because the main thing is getting rid of that appalling white and blue crap that's down the ground floor at the moment. So I'd hope, you know, Hackney Council's managed it for ages and obviously hasn't managed it very well. How can we guarantee that what you're showing us there, which is a definite improvement, is actually what it's going to look like? Thank you.
Peter, I'm not going to let you ask that question. You know, we are dealing with the application that is in front of us. And, you know, members, we can't spin off to have a load of grief about all of these other issues. So please restrain yourself. I've talked to you before. We must talk about planning issues. Of course, we're all disappointed with this, that, and the other. You know, but the substantive one, I think, was to Timothy in terms of the various concerns of Maggie. About some of the heritage issues, although we know it's not listed. I wonder if you've actually taken account of these and considered them, Tim.
Sorry, Chair, I also asked a question to Maggie. I wanted Maggie to say what her view was on the line we're taking, which is we're not going to try and undo the Edwardian changes to the terrace.
Okay, Maggie, do you understand our take on this?
Yeah, but also I forgot to mention something about the new extension. The light-colored brick property is blocking some of the windows, like old windows on the ground floor on the rear side of the property. And this is not mentioned. So that new extension causes blockage and destruction on that side of the windows at the rear of the property, including the green area. And there is about the front facade, the bricks are the same color in red color, and if you remove the coloring, that will revert the property back to its original look. And in the photo that I find from 1900, it is a kind of like black, dark colored front facade on the ground floor. But I still cannot understand why we have to destroy the small green area just to have another extension, which in a way separates the old building from the newly built one. And also, I don't understand why do we have to have another floor on the roof instead of keeping the property as it is and revert it to its original form, keep it as it is with all the terraced and listed properties along the line. That is how what I think.
Tim, can you reflect on Councillor Snell's comments and Maggie's about the heritage issues, please?
Yeah. I mean, when I first saw this building, one of my questions was why it wasn't listed, and there are good reasons. There's been some discussion about it as a Georgian building. It's not a Georgian building, although it's also been altered. In its original form, it was 3 houses, which would have had steps up to the raised ground floor like the other houses, but they were always later. They're about 1850, so they're early Victorian. And they have a different plan form, which is shown by the outriggers at the back. The building was heavily altered about 1906 to make way for trams, so they actually cut off a bit of the corner where that Shamford area is, and they reduced the front gardens and moved the facade backwards, and that's why you've got a red brick facade, which is about 1906. So it's a 1853 houses that's been turned into a sort of 1906 Edwardian run of shops and things. So the reason it wasn't listed is because it's not particularly old, and also it's been heavily altered, so it didn't merit listing when they considered the other buildings because of its date and the alteration. I don't imagine it would be listable now. There was some discussion about internal features. Because the building isn't listed, we don't actually have any control over heritage internally, but what I would say is there was a very long pre-application process for this application. And to be honest, we put the Property Services Department through the ringer with it. We gave them a very hard time. So this is a product of some very ongoing conversations around conservation. Myself and Matt Payne visited the building in detail. And one of the points of the scheme, although we don't really have control over internal features, was to retain 2 of the 3 staircases, which were the best and most original staircases. And the plan form for the flats was arranged so that all the chimney breasts could be retained. I'm not sure what else you wanted me to say.
Okay, so it's been well considered. Thank you very much indeed. AJ, I think you're next.
Yeah, not sure if this is relevant, but I just want to ask it quickly. There's a reduction in office space in the building, and you said that Stretton's done a market report and said it was viable. Did they comment on the existing arrangement of if you had kept the same office space, whether that would have been viable or not?
Yeah, from an I'm speaking. From an early point, the intention was to get rid of the office space entirely, as being effectively defunct. That the spaces wouldn't really attract any kind of tenant as an office at the moment. So we've got property guardians in there at the moment. Obviously the use has never changed despite the fact that they're in there. But with the auxiliary offices above, they're not up to any kind of spec. That was what was being sold to us from the time of a 2018 application that was subsequently withdrawn. We were keen to see some office use at ground floor to make up for the office uses that were being lost at the upper floors. Originally it was coming in, it was going to be a restaurant maybe at ground floor level, but we wanted to see some office use. But in terms of what's there at present being used as an office, I think we were relatively well convinced that that was never really going to be a goer without substantial spend that wouldn't be coming forward for the rent you'd get at the end of it.
And Nick, the fact that it's a sort of town centre doesn't influence the retention of office space. You're regarding it as a residential area, are you?
It's more that, but it's not a priority office area. Like it's just on the edge of the town centre. But it's more the fact that on the planning balance, we think that losing the upper floors of not very good quality office space and still getting better quality office space at the ground floor, and then having a mixed use is definitely a better use for this building than existing. Than acceptable.
Thank you. Does that answer you, AJ?
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Claire, Joseph, I think you had one.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, I was also interested in some of the internal features, but that's been touched on. So, I mean, I'm just going to ask about the Conservation Area Committee's concerns about overmassing here. Perhaps perhaps our friends on planning can comment on that. And I think Katie touched on it before, but I mean, I'm just not sure that this grey building fits very well. I mean, to my eye, it would look nice if it was in a kind of red brick, and it would at least flow around the corner a bit better. And I just wondered why that choice had been made, really. It looks a bit out of context to me.
Can we ask Carlotta and then Matthew, please?
Yeah, I'm
Why
happy
did you
to.
choose the material for the dormer section, mansard?
Are we referring to the dormer or the infill houses?
Sorry.
Sorry, the infill houses.
Oh,
okay. The infill. Yeah. Okay. The sort of design principles that we implemented on the scheme was that anything that was new, we wanted to articulate as being new and modern and contemporary in design. So we saw that kind of infill site between the existing building and the old ambulance station site as a kind of transition piece, because the proportions, I mean, you can see on the kind of screen, the proportions don't quite kind of relate to the existing building. So we didn't think that a red brick would be appropriate to kind of marry it to the existing host building, because the proportions are completely different, the datum lines are completely different. And we also then wanted to, with the kind of window openings, we related that to the old ambulance station site. So having those kind of more contemporary openings. So when it came to materiality, we felt that it didn't seem appropriate to completely give it over to the old ambulance station site either. So we decided to introduce new brickwork that would really kind of emphasize this this building as a transitional element in the proposal.
Okay, Matt, you accepted that, didn't you, earlier on?
Yeah, so I touched on that, and obviously the architects just touched on that again about it being a transitional sort of link block between the two, and having something that is complementary to the bricks on either side, but also distinctive and high quality. And as we mentioned, we will be seeing all the samples to make sure that they do meet that quality threshold.
Thank you. I've got some questions now, I think. Oh, here we are. The legal agreement, I think you call it a unilateral understanding. The recommendation talks about legal agreement. Is the recommendation changed slightly, Nick?
When you say it's a recommendation change, I don't follow you. What do you mean?
Well, the recommendation talks about subject to a legal agreement. Should it say be subject to a
that's what you mean.
unilateral?
I mean, I'll take advice on that, but my understanding is that unilateral undertaking is a legal agreement. So
okay,
I can probably step in there. It could be either. I mean, where it's a council application, the most common way that we deal with that is for it to be a unilateral undertaking. It will depend following a thorough investigation of the land ownership side of things. But either way, it's a planning obligation pursuant.
But that recommendation summary, Sam, is okay.
I'll take another look at it. If it refers to a unilateral undertaking, then I'm comfortable with it, given that it's a council application. The meat of it is that it will be a planning obligation pursuant to Section 106.
Okay. You've got Pentagon Road in there somewhere, Nick. It's Paragon Road.
yeah, I noticed that to my chagrin, just when it was too late to change it.
Thank you. And all the other questions have been answered. Is there anybody else before we move on to vote on this? I think we all know what we're about. So the recommendation is to grant planning permission subject conditions and a legal agreement. What I'm going to ask you to do is, first of all, to put up your hands if you support that, and to keep your hands up while Gareth takes a roll call. I think Gareth did it last time with Katie, and that seemed better than me. You hear enough of my voice. So that's the recommendation. All those in favour, please show.
Now, Councillor Stobbs, you did slightly cut out there. If I heard you correctly, you want me to
call, Gareth.
Okay, then I will start with you. Councillor Stobbs, what is your vote, please?
In favour.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go across the screen in front of me. So the next councillor I can see is Councillor Hanson. What is your vote, please?
In favour.
Thank you very much. Councillor Potter is the next one on my screen. What is your vote, please?
In favour.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bell, what is your vote, please?
In favour.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Joseph, what is your vote, please?
I'm abstaining.
Thank you very much. Councillor Race, what is your vote, please?
In favour.
Thank you very much. On next, I have Councillor Snell in front of me. What is your vote, please, Councillor?
In favour.
Thank you very much. And if I'm correct, Councillor Chowahan, yours is the last vote. Thank you very much. In favour, thank you. That is all the councillors who have voted.
Thank you very much indeed. Look forward to seeing the building, and hope it. We hope it will come forward with a bit of affordable housing in there. We'll talk about that in the pub, perhaps. On to the next item, then, please. Thank you very much, everybody who's presented.
Chair, you were going to call a break after the first item.
Oh yes, I was. Well,
I don't know.
yes.
I don't know whether you want to carry on because.
No, let's have a break because the next one will be a reasonable size, won't it? So 5 minutes. So if we can come back at 7:30, please. Thank you. Okay, so Nick Jenkins. Nick, are you with us? If you put your camera on, that would be good. Thank you. Sam, are you with us? You've got your hand up there, please. If you could take that down, that would help. Thank you. I've got Steve, Joris, Kazim, and Robert Brew. Steve, I can see. Joris, I can see. Kazim, I can see. You're a very valuable name for Scrabble, Kazim. And Rob, there you go. I got an 82 points the other day. Scrabble.
My highest scoring word recently was vizier. I was very good at that.
I got officer. I used all 7 letters, so I got an extra 30, extra 50. Okay, is there enough of us here? Sam's here, so we can mostly start, can't we?
Is Councillor Potter back? No, not by the look of it. I think we can probably give it another minute or two.
Is her tablet here? Can't see. Claire Potter, are you out there? Yes, you are. Are you with us, Claire?
I'm going to message the the thing is, if she's away from her device, she probably won't get my email.
Don't want to start that, not knowing she's.
Yeah, I would just to be on the side, and we were yeah. I'll give her another minute.
Shall I call her quickly?
That would be very helpful, Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, she's back. Oh, good.
She's back. Okay, that's all of us, isn't it?
Apologies.
Okay. Steve, please. Great Eastern Street and Hewitt Street. I went to visit there today, actually.
Okay, can everybody see the presentation okay?
We can. You're a bit.
Yes, thank you.
If you can speak up or get closer to the microphone.
Okay, is that loud enough?
That's better. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, this is the application site, 19 Great Eastern Street and 9 Hewitt Street. This shows just a little bit more context. So this is the site here with the red sort of shading. It's in Shoreditch, close to Bishop Street, Great Eastern Street, Curtin Road here. There's lots of other sort of large developments which have recently taken place in that area. So you've got sort of Principal Place development here and the stage development immediately to the south here. And this sort of picture on the right here just shows the conservation area. The site itself is it's just in here, so it's just outside the South Shoreditch Conservation Area, but it is surrounded on a number of sides by the conservation area, and it's within an area identified as of townscape interest, although not actually within the conservation area itself. Just to sort of give a bit of context, this is the stage development site to the south, which is a sort of a big development. Members will probably be familiar with mixed use office buildings and other commercial uses here and here. A large 40-story residential tower building here, and a viaducts, old railway viaduct building here, which is going to be converted to a sort of public open space with a cafe on roof level. And also a public square with archaeology museum beneath as well. So And that this scheme is just immediately to the south, and it does involve a number of sort of public realm enhancements. It's private land which is going to be enhanced by the development, which is immediately opposite the application site. You can see just sort of around here. Some views of the site itself. It was last used as a street food market, sort of nighttime kind of use. You can just see the view here, from Great Eastern Street, with the sort of stage development behind and the railway viaduct, and then here just a sort of view looking a bit more south down Great Eastern Street. This is Principal Place. You can see there, just sort of poking out behind Arnold House, which is a building fronting Great Eastern Street and adjacent to the site. And this is a view up Curtin Road. You can't actually see the site itself, but it's just a bit more context. This is the stage development here in Hewitt Street, which is where the site is just sort of down there. And then this is the view down Hewitt Street. This is an NSPCC office building. It's not actually part of the application site. The site starts sort of around about here, from where there's a sort of vehicle entrance into the sort of rear courtyard. And this is the part of the application site. This building will be demolished as part of the proposals. This is the view sort of from the south, from Plough Yard. The big building is a part of the stage, and the application site is sort of just behind that. You can see it a little bit more here. This is Arnold House, and the application building will sort of come in front of that building there. These show just how the massing of the proposals fits in with its context. There's two main bits to this scheme. There's the hotel element, which is this massing here. So you can see it just sort of fits in next to Arnold House to the north, and the stage to the south. This is the sort of ground floor plan of the hotel, sort of restaurant, reception areas at ground floor level. Two entrances from the public, publicly accessible space here, and from Great Eastern Street here, and then some service entrances here at the side. Sort of a standard elevation, floor plan of showing hotel rooms as you sort of move up through the building. And then at roof level, it's biodiverse roof with PV array and sort of lift overrun areas. And the elevation, so this is the sort of view from Great Eastern Street. It's 12 stories, a brick facade for the hotel with these sort of concave bay features. The idea being that the sort of grid picks up on some of the other buildings that you see around Shoreditch, for instance, the TU building, that kind of Shoreditch vernacular, but with a contemporary twist on it, with these sort of concave bays. And you can see a bit more of the materiality of the building with the sort of brick, grey brickwork upper levels, and then at the lower the base has a sort of darker, more concrete, robust feel as it meets the ground. And then some sort of other images which show how the building will appear, more closely. This is the sort of service entrance from Hewitt Street there, and then some CGI just showing the ground floor. This is from Great Eastern Street, and you can see the sort of public realm that's been created and how the development will face onto that and help to make that an active space. And then from looking sort of northwards from the sort of stage public realm area as well. These are some of the views from Great Eastern Street looking north. The building has been subject to 2 design review panel meetings, and the scheme did evolve as part of that. One of the main sort of issues that the DRP considered was how the building sort of relates to Arnold House and the best sort of design approach. And originally it did sort of wrap around the corner, and it was a bit more similar sort of height to Arnold House, but the DRP felt that it should do something a bit different. It would be better if it went a bit higher. Even they felt that would help the building free itself from Arnold House and appear as a sort of more interesting sort of endpoint to the block. And then you sort of can see that in a little bit more detail there. And then just moving on to the office building, this is facing Hewitt Street, so you can see it here with the stage development to the south. offices on basement, ground floor. You can see the layout here, reception area. Then it's got a separate entrance for cycles, and with a lift that goes down to the basement cycle storage area. And then as it moves up to the upper levels, it's set back from Arnold House to the north with a small sort of roof terrace area. And at the roof level, a significant amount of plant on the roof of the office building, which limits the amount of space available for biodiverse roofs, but there still is some provision for that there. And the materials, a similar sort of materiality to the hotel. The intention is that they have a sort of family resemblance, but with some differences, and it has a more kind of rounded columns rather than concave of the hotel, but still with similar sort of brick sort of materials and color tones. You don't really see much of the office building. This is the only real view you have of it, because Hewitt Street is narrow, so you'll have views of it from quite a bleak angle looking down Hewitt Street. So on the left you can see the existing, and then on the right the proposed, and then you've got the stage buildings sort of immediately on the opposite side of Hewitt Street to the south. So there aren't really any longer views of this part of the proposal. A couple of photos of site notices displayed in Great Eastern Street and Hewitt Street. Members may notice that there were no neighbour comments received from the on the application, but we have done a full round of consultation letters and site notices. And I think this is probably due to the fact that there isn't many residential properties immediately adjacent to the site, well, with the exception of the stage building, but that isn't occupied at the moment, even though we did send letters to those addresses technically. But yeah, it's so just to confirm, the consultation has been undertaken in accordance with our sort of statement of community involvement. Those other slides are really just in case any questions come up. So just draw members' attention to the addendum report as well, with just a couple of changes to the conditions following discussions with the applicant, and also an additional comment from Transport for London, which is referenced there. Recommendation is as per the rest of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. It must be the first time ever we've had a 12-storey building with no objectors from the public, so it's interesting. Perhaps the developers ought to be building about 20 stories, but don't tell them, please, Nick. Steve, it's your manner. Would you like to ask the first question?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got two, sort of three main questions, I suppose. The first one, I was really pleased to see some good detail about the archaeological sort of importance of the area, and I wondered whether officers in particular could talk through what the planning conditions are around that and the exploration of the area as the site is developed. My second comment is on the I think probably a few councillors on the panel may have similar questions around the bulking, and I noticed that one of the consultees, the Shoreditch Conservation Area Advisory Committee, has some reservations about the bulk and the kind of placing of the building. So if officers could answer those two, that would be great, because I forgot my third because Vincent called me first.
I'll come back to you for that.
Thanks.
So on the archaeology, we've got a relatively standard condition requiring a written scheme of investigation. As part of the application, if it's in an archaeological priority area, we consult with the Historic England Archaeology Service, and the main sort of person that deals with that, Adam Single, he's sort of very experienced with the archaeology in the area, and he's worked a lot on the stage development to the south as well. So he's really sort of familiar with the sort of conditions underneath lots of these buildings. So as part of the condition, they're required to submit a statement sort of saying how they're going to go about recording the archaeology during the construction phase, and then we sort of consult with Historic England again as when that's submitted, and then if they're happy with that, then we can sort of sometimes part discharge that condition, and then they can get on with construction, and they go about the recording at the same time, and then they'll produce a sort of final report at the end of it.
Could I ask a supplementary just to that point, Chair? Is that okay? Thanks, Steve. That was really helpful. So the stage sort of development predates my councillorship, actually. But so I'd be interested to know what happens if they do find something of kind of particular interest. Is there an agreement that the sort of construction and kind of stops, and does it come back to the committee, or what's the kind of process if anything is found?
I mean, I'm not entirely sure. Perhaps someone else, perhaps Rob, might want to sort of comment on that.
I can answer that question because it came up with the site on the other side of Fairchild Place, where they discovered quite more remains than they were expecting to find. What they have is like a watching brief, so the site's monitored, and then if archaeological remains unexpectedly are found, then construction stops, and the watching brief includes mechanisms for that to be excavated, treated however the Museum of London feel is appropriate, and so the development comes to a standstill. Obviously the stage is the extreme example, because when they carried out the excavations, the remains that they found were a completely different size and shape than from what they were expecting, so they had to replan that. And I think there's probably a gap of about 2 years for them to sort that out, and the development had to cease in the meantime. So it is covered by
fairly robust. Yeah, great. Thank you, Rob.
I think Nick wanted to. Nick, did you want to respond to that? You put your hand up.
Yeah, yes, if I may, just to add, our approach to archaeology, the first thing we did was to employ Mola, who were the advisors on the stage development, and they've been in active dialogue with Historic England already, and they've actually agreed and undertaken some limited boreholing on site, as was possible, sort of in and around the Dinorama Street Market. So some results are back from that, and that so far has confirmed Mola's suspicions that our site actually sits in a low-lying area. They technically refer to it as swamp area. So it's Mola's suspicion was that archaeology is unlikely to be found on our site due to their knowledge of the area. Historic England are happy with those conclusions so far, and if subject to resolution to grant this evening and planning permission, they'll move to the next stage, Historic England and Mola, in terms of rolling out some further investigation works, and we'll take it from there. But we do not expect, and it's my project manager's worst headache, is to find significant archaeological remains. But we don't expect it to do so, and that's coming from Mola, who are the experts in the area, of course.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Was that both questions, Steve?
No. So the second question was the massing of the building and why it's been chosen. I know we touched on it in the proposal, and then Chair, if you wouldn't mind, just my third question, which I did remember, was in the proposal itself. It says demolition of existing office building. I can't quite work out what office building is being demolished from the papers or from the proposal presentation. Sorry, is there a small sort of office building?
I went there today, and you know the NSPCC building.
Yeah,
that's the tall one. The same building drops down to 4 stories, and it's that four-story element that's going.
Right. Okay.
So the NSPCC element of it, or the tall bit at the front there that you can see at the front, is staying. But if you go beyond that, it falls down to 4 stories, and it's that bit that's
going.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you,
Matt. Can you do the DRP and the height issues?
That's going to be Yoris, Chair. He's covered all his answer.
Massive.
Yes, hi. Yes, thanks, Councillor, for your question. Yeah, as Steve referred to earlier, the site has been reviewed by the design review panel twice, and it was actually the joint conclusion of that panel that the previously proposed scheme would actually fit better within the local context if it was slightly higher. So for that reason, we have the massing that we ended up with. And in terms of how it fits into the context, it's worth noting how varied the context is. The new building is roughly 2 stories taller than the adjacent Arnold house. So in that sense, it's roughly similar. It builds up slightly, but then is right adjacent to the 33-story tower of the stage development. So in that sense, it looks very modest, of course. So we think for that reason it's acceptable in the overall townscape to build up slightly from the adjacent building of the Arnold House and the other side, Shakespeare House. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Is that enough for you, Steve?
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I noticed Arnold House today, the extension, which is the bit just around the corner from there. They've done a superb job, and yeah, it's a real good development, the Arnold House one. So I'm pleased that your building, Nick, is set back, because it does reveal a bit more of what is quite a nice building, I think. I've got Claire Joseph next, I think. Yes, Claire.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
Yes, you can as well.
Thank you. I've got 2 questions, if I may. The first is about the usage for hotel. So in the report under 6.21, we look at oversupply and the idea of overconcentration, and it's concluded that actually there isn't an overconcentration of hotels in Hoxton, and being an urban area, that there will be a demand. Well, I would beg to differ, because the last time a hotel came before the planning committee that was going to be in Hoxton, around this area, I called up about 21 different hotels that were within a mile of Great Eastern Street, and they all had space available. So I would say that, as somebody who lives quite near here, that there really is already an oversupply. And I don't know how you can prove at the moment that there's a demand, considering that we've spent the past year in lockdown. So is there any data that can demonstrate demand, if you like? Because I don't personally feel that there is a need for another high-rise hotel in this area. So I'd be interested in your views on that. And the second point, just about the massing, picking up on what Steve was saying there about tall buildings. This area and areas around it are becoming really quite bad wind tunnels. I don't think another tall building is going to help at all. So what can we say to residents there that say, well, we can't walk down the road without getting half blown away? I mean, it might look better to be a bit tall, but what does it feel like for people walking down the street? And I appreciate that there haven't been responses to the consultation, but there are a lot of estates in the area, and I don't know if they were quite within reach of the consultation, but those people do still have to walk.
Okay, good points. Steve, tell us about the hotels and the wind issues.
Yeah, so in terms of the hotel demand or need, yeah, so paragraph 6.2.1, it includes an extract there from policy LP25, and there's two sort of they're two sort of separate things really. And one is about the sort of overall supply of hotels in the borough, and for that purpose we use the GLA's data which they have, and it's sort of referenced there in the next paragraph, the GLA working paper projections on demand and supply for visitor accommodation. And we sort of as part of the application, we check what the sort of latest data is, based on, you know, the sort of there's a projected demand, and then the completions that have happened, as well as other schemes with planning permission. And then as part of the data, the GLA also have sort of 3 different scenarios for how many hotel rooms will be lost as part of sort of redevelopment as well, up to 2041, which is what their sort of data is for. And using the GLA data, we've and then we can see that there is still a surplus of around about 1,000 hotel rooms in the borough before we're meeting that target. And we've also taken into account a couple of other schemes which we know about, which have not got planning permission but have been have resolution to grant permission. So, for instance, the East Road scheme, which is probably one of the last ones to be considered by committee, sort of back in the summer of last year. So, so looking at the data we have from the GLA, it's there's still 908 rooms still to be provided before we sort of hit that level. So this development will add some further rooms to that. But so we're getting closer to it, but we're not at that point yet. And therefore, you know, if we were to kind of try to refuse an application on the grounds that there's a sort of oversupply of hotels in the borough, it would be very difficult to do if the GLA sort of data wasn't sort of backing us up on that point, really. The second point of the policy is about this is a more of an amenity one, really, and about the sort of number of hotels in the immediate vicinity of the site. And so, you know, that there have clearly been a number of other developments of hotels recently, but we didn't feel, given the character of the area, that it would be result in a sort of an over concentration of hotels in that sort of immediate area, given its sort of mixed use central activity zone, kind of quite a dense urban location. And then finally, in terms of the wind, I mean, we would consider this building to be more of a sort of a mid-rise building, really, because it's quite similar to the sort of similar in height to the adjacent Arnold House next door. In terms of wind impacts, the stage building is going to be having a sort of much more of an impact on kind of local kind of wind conditions at the ground level. And you know, wind is not, the building's not really going to be causing wide-ranging impacts over a wide area. It will just be, you know, at that sort of ground floor conditions on Hewitt Street. I think finally, in terms of the sort of consultation point, the other sort of nearest residential properties to this would be Fairchild Place, Pennybank Court. I think it's referenced, and they're on the opposite side. They both adjoin Fairchild Place. They're on the opposite side of that railway viaduct building. They're around 40 or 50 meters from the site, so they're further than we would normally consult properties on. There might also be some other residential above retail on Great Eastern Street, but again, some distance from the site. You know, our statement of community involvement for major applications says we consult properties within 30 meters, so they're further than we would normally consult.
Thank you, Claire. I remember when there was no hotels in the borough at all, and it has been an amazing transformation or change. And I look forward to refusing hotels on the basis that we've hit the 2041 target, or whatever it is. I know 20 years early. But Nick is representing people who think there is plenty of scope for more hotels in London. And so that's an interesting thing, that the GLA agrees with them. Yes.
So, well, I just wondered if the GLA had updated any of these views, just in light of the practices that have developed over the past year, because presumably a lot of these hotels are for business people, and I mean, people are working from home quite successfully, aren't they? So
you want to ask Nick that first?
I don't know. Perhaps
then we'll go to Steve. Nick, what are your investors thinking about COVID and hotels and demand?
I think we need to talk about a long-term view here. You know, we don't want to make any knee-jerk reactions in terms of currently what's going on. We need to think about London for the next 20, 30, 40 years. Hotels invariably take long leases in properties, 25 years, 35 years with renewal periods. So they're very much thinking long term. There's still interest in this building, in this site for hotel use. So absolutely positive in that regard. And it's a very positive news story, I think, for this area, because the hotel will complete the urban block. There's a piece missing out of the jigsaw of this current block. It will link into Arnold House, which I was pleased to hear that you said it was a very nice building, because that building is in the ownership of the current application that you're considering tonight. So similarly, this scheme will be a high quality building linking into the applicant's previous high quality building. And if we go forward with this, you'll have residential in the stage tower, ground floor active frontage beneath the hotel, a hotel building, and then links into office buildings. So very much, a mixed use scheme. I won't go any further off tack. So very positive in terms of the hotel use and mixed use for that particular small area and at a wider level. Just on the wind, the effects of wind. As I said, this development completes an urban block, so we're just finishing off the perimeter block. We're not building out on our own a very tall building that would cause any effects there. We did discuss microclimate, as it's called, with a consultant very early on in the scheme, but it was effectively screened out at that stage. So it's something we've considered, but didn't need to be looked into further or presented in any application document, for example.
Thank you. And Steve, what does the planning process think of COVID and the demand for, well, anything really?
Well, I think that's what the latest data that sort of came through was from around July time. So I guess things are no one really knows what the future of work and how it's going to the extent of working from home and so on, what it will be like. I don't think the GLA has had the time to sort of do a wholesale review of the sort of the evidence base for demand for hotels in London or Hackney in particular. Maybe that would be something that they might look to do in the future. But at the moment, this is what we have to go on really, and it's showing that there still is demand for to meet supply for up for another 908 rooms.
Okay, thank you. So we have discussed hotel use. I think that was Anymore? I think I've got Peter next, and then Claire Potter, and Natalie. Do you want to come in, Natalie, now?
Just briefly, please, Chair. So Steve's absolutely right. The GLA haven't had a chance to update the evidence around hotels. They have recently commissioned a report around the impact that COVID has had on the central activities zone, but that really looks at various scenarios. I mean, it says that London is well placed as the central activities zone as an ecosystem is well placed for recovery. But it really doesn't go into too much detail in terms of the actual projections around hotels. So the evidence that's referred to in the report is the most up-to-date evidence in terms of demand for hotels at this point in time.
Okay, so we take it at face value rather than Peter.
Yes, my personal perspective is that the minute I'm allowed to, I'm going to be out even more than I was before. So bring it on. And in particular, and this is where I might address Councillor Race as a local councillor. I was quite excited looking at this proposal in the background because there's a hell of a lot happening there. We see it in bits and pieces, but this is going to be congratulations to ourselves and to our officers. I think we're creating a very exciting environment there, and at some point, we won't just have our normal meeting with the developers and the planning committee and the planning officers. We need a meeting with the people of Shoreditch and to walk them around and explain what's happening, because I think we have an exciting area here. That's background. You can organise it at the race, and we'll all turn up and love seeing what's happening, because we don't see things in the round, and I'm sure the people, the conservation an advisory committee does see it, but I think we're doing some quite great stuff here. I want to just focus in, if I can, on the design, because obviously the design panel has been all over this, and I think they've come out with something that's actually quite exciting and fits in with the area. But I just want to give probably Matt a chance to come back on this, and he's not been briefed on it, so sorry, Matt. But basically, people get suspicious about the design panel, and I've told you I think it should be more open. But if you're going to get the design panel involved, do you need a pre-application? Number two, does that then influence the final decision of officers, because it somehow compromises them that then really clever little curve stuff here. There has been on a number of these applications in Shoreditch, and you think, hey, that's fun. That's the sort of stuff the Victorians would have done to create something a bit different. So we're creating a completely different environment. Who's responsible for it? And I'd love to understand the dynamic on this development of why we've got some quite interesting, to me, curve designs, stuff that creates interest on the street, because half the time all we hear about is, oh, well, this respects the square, rectangular nature of traditional Shoreditch. So I get bored with that. So can you just talk us through it?
Let's ask Joris first, and if Matt's got any background, because Joris has been involved in the particular application, and that's what we're here to discuss this evening.
Fair enough.
Tell us about the design review panel's contribution.
Yes, so first to mention that I joined the project around the time of the second design review panel, so Matt might have some further background. But yeah, you raised some interesting questions. I think the pre-app is of course always useful and necessary for such big developments, and design review panel doesn't overrule any of that. It's just a second opinion that gets taken into consideration, but the council officers have the final say in the recommendation. So yeah, I think for that reason it worked out quite well this time. We roughly agreed with the recommendations of the panel, and like you say, some good design has come of it, and it has been useful in securing some improvements since the initial proposals. So I hope that answers your question.
Matt, a general thing about
Yeah, just on a more general note, just in terms of the design review panel, we always try and bring schemes at the pre-application stage, because obviously we can bring about changes and we can work together, whereas obviously if an application comes in and we take it to DRP, that can be quite problematic. So pre-application stage for DRP is always the way that we want to go. And as Joris mentioned, obviously they're an independent panel, so they inform our assessment, but they don't sort of overrule anything. And yeah, so I was involved with the first DRP for this one. It's been very collaborative, lots of discussion about the massing and how it relates to Arnold House, how it fits in with the stage and the conservation area. And yeah, we've had the 2 DRP sessions for this one, so it's been through a really robust design process.
Thank you, Nick. Why is the architect not here tonight? Do we know?
That's probably an admin error of not registering them in time, but I can speak on their behalf to a degree. But just to endorse what was said in terms of the design review panel by Matt here, it's very collaborative. We had 3 DRPs. I think we had the last one just before COVID. I think we had the first virtual one just as COVID started, so challenges there. But I think it worked really well. I was really happy as well that Matt and Joris, their views were very closely aligned to the design review panel. And I think very much we were helped here also by the architects, being BGY, who were also the architects on Arnold House, and also they're based in the T building, so they could see the site from their office, which gave them an even greater vested interest in the design.
Okay, let's hope we don't have any questions about the architecture of the building that we can't get answered. Peter, carry on if you want.
I don't. Sorry, Chair. I don't think my questions are fully answered. So, if I look at the Dalston Works, or whatever they call it, the development in Gillette Square in my ward, they don't go for the pre-application process, Hackney Cooperative Development, because they say it's too expensive. It's massively controversial, but not necessarily for planning-related reasons. So people pay extra to go through the pre-application process. So,
Peter, can you bring that up with officers at
no,
another time?
this is a question relevant to this application, which is, does design panel get involved in every application equally? And then the other main question that I asked originally was, where exactly did the idea of this interesting curved design come from, which adds interest to the streetscape in my view? And I'm just interested in knowing how it developed out of what seems like a very good relationship between the council and the developers.
Peter, I can answer the first one. Officers pick and choose which developments they think might be useful to promote the idea of design review panel too. I think we can ask the second question, which is to Nick about the architecture, seeing as he can tell us all about the architecture. So where did the idea of the curves come from, Nick?
Well, the idea in the broad sense, came from our architects. At least the first design response to the site didn't involve curves, which went to DRP2, but it evolved between DRP1 and DRP2. And the approach to design was very much trying to, as I say, complete the urban block, but form the link between the city fringe, and the stage, very tall residential tower, and the conservation area to the north. So the design was very much trying to link those two landscapes together, and as set out in Steve's presentation, very much with the high window heights and the regularity, trying to reflect historical warehouses, etc., in the area. And the curves are developing that theme further to try and add interest. And you've got a concave approach for the hotel, and effectively convex for the office building. Slight differentiation in materials, but very much working together. So I suppose the curved idea came from our architects, but then finessed again through collaboration with the DRP and also Matt and his team.
Okay, thank you. Does that satisfy you, Peter? We could, of course, defer the decision if we want to talk to the architects who aren't here tonight.
I think, Chair, I've already said that that I think it's a splendid application, and I just wanted to know how it came through the process. So we have a lot of people watching, so we need to educate and inform our wider public.
Okay.
Like the BBC?
Yes. Channel 4 was going to do that, wasn't it? Claire Potter.
Thanks, Chair. I was just going to point out that I know we were talking about a question mark over demand for hotel spaces, and I appreciate the comments that were made about the GLA, but obviously the same is also the case for office buildings too. So, I mean, I guess the answer is going to be quite similar, but I just think it's important to note that too, that's also a question going forward for the area overall.
Is it the same sort of thing? We have to take it on face value.
Well, it's a bit different because the site is in a priority office area, so we're looking to get as much sort of a high proportion of offices as part of mixed use development. So I think for this scheme, I think the policy sort of requirement is, or policy sort of target is 60% offices, 40% alternative uses. But we're not achieving that on this scheme because the hotel is more floor space than the office is. So that's that's a sort of a bit of a downside, really, I suppose, is when you'd assess it against the policies. However, I think when we looked at the sort of site context, there is a lot of office floor space immediately adjacent, in Arnold House, and also to the south. So when you look at the sort of mix of uses in the wider area, it didn't seem to be too harmful to have a slightly higher proportion of hotel floor space as part of this development, really, I suppose.
Thank you. Nick, is it the same answer? Is it you're looking over the longer term, your clients?
Yeah, looking over a longer term for the office. At the moment, the office building on site is 2,170 square meters, and it's going to be demolished and rebuilt with an office building of 4,665 square meters. So doubling the size of that office building and a little bit more, which we thought was appropriate. And it's just useful to note in terms of the land uses, what we've been careful to do is to, we're an existing office building, which needed to be brought up to date. Looked at conversion of that building, but determined that building a new office building as part of the family was the better approach. So that office building is opposite an equivalent height office building of the stage development, so they face each other. And then the hotel building that is, residential, is in the residential use class in terms of the C use classes, faces the stage tower. So we've got office facing office, and accommodation where people are sleeping facing accommodation where people are sleeping. So there's a relationship there. But very much our approach was to bring forward the mixed use development as we've done, having regard to all of the land uses surrounding us on all sides, and having basically putting the most appropriate land uses in the most appropriate location for the current context.
Thank you. Okay, I think that's all of us. We know what we're about. I'm missing Claire Joseph, I think. Has she been? I think she's gone away. Well, that's it. Okay, so we'll move on to vote. So the same as before. So the recommendation is to grant conditional planning permission subject to legal agreement and stage 2 approval from the GLA. If you want to support that, please put your hand up and hold your hand up, and then Gareth can go through a roll call. All those in favour, please show.
Okay, I'm going to go from the top of my screen. Councillor Stobbs again. What are you voting, Councillor Stobbs? What's your vote, please? In favour, thank you. Next along my screen, Councillor Race. What is your vote, please?
In favour, thank you, Gareth.
Thank you very much. Going off my screen, the next councillor I have on my screen to vote is Councillor Bell. What is your vote, please, Councillor Bell?
In favour.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hanson is next. What is your vote, Councillor Hanson?
In favour.
Thank you. Next on my screen is Councillor Potter. What is your vote, please, Councillor Potter?
In favour.
Okay. Now, next along is Councillor Joseph. I will ask her, Councillor Joseph, are you there? If you are, could you
counter out?
Okay.
Yes,
oh, no.
I'm here. I'm here.
Okay.
Have you been with us? Where have you been, Claire?
Sorry, just had to pop to the baby for 5 minutes.
Oh well.
Do you want me not to vote on the item in that case?
Sam, what do you think?
Sam, your microphone's turned
Can't
off.
hear you, Sam.
Apologies. If you feel like you haven't been here enough to hear all the considerations that have been deliberated, then it is proper that you withdraw from the vote. If, on the other hand, you feel like you have heard everything, then feel free to participate.
Okay, Claire, what do you want to do?
Well, it's difficult to know what you've missed, isn't it? So perhaps it's best if I withdraw in that case.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Chalahan, what is your vote, please?
In favour.
Thank you very much. And last on my screen for the councillors to vote is Councillor Snell. How do you vote, please, Councillor?
In favour.
Thank you very much. That is all the voting.
That's all of us then. So we look forward to seeing the 12-storey building come out of the ground, hopefully in a post-COVID world where we all want to go and stay in a hotel in Shoreditch. Thank you very much indeed. Right.
Thank you.
111 Clapton.
Thank you, Nick.
Common. So we've got no objectors and no.
Well, we've got one representative,
Gurpage.
Chair.
Good Gurpage, haven't we? Gurpage, are you here?
Hi.
Yes.
Perhaps I am. Hi.
Thank you very much. So we've got Claire as the case officer, Matt, Kazim, and Gareth as the team. Is Gareth here? Oh, that's a G. Are you under there, Gareth? Yes. Okay. Okay. Over to officers then, please. 111 Clapton Common.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just share my screen. Are you able to see that item, number 7?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so the site is 111 Clapton Common. This is just the red line boundary of the site. To the northeast is Clapton Common, just for context. So these are some aerials of the site. So this building here is the subject building. And as you can see, the building is located in a row of terraces, residential buildings, but mixed in use, and heavily modified at the rear of the properties. And these are just some photos I've taken from Clapton Common. This yellow building here is the subject site. So the proposal consists of 2 elements. The first element is the continued use or retrospective use of the site as a 13-bedroom HMO. You will appreciate from the officer's report that the applicant has stated that the building has been used as an HMO since the council acquired the site in the 1970s. However, unfortunately, we don't have planning records to demonstrate this. But then it is worth noting that the last planning record we have for the site refers to it as a care home. So then the second component is retrospective permission for the reduction of a chimney on this party wall here, so with number 109 Clapton Common. And then this is just a site notice that we put up in February. So to confirm, we put up a site notice and sent out letters to neighbouring properties, however did not receive any objections. But the application is presented to you this evening as it's a council application for a change of use. So I'll take you through some of the plans. This is the existing site layout, which will remain largely the same. There will be some front landscaping works, which I'll detail in a minute. And then these are the floor plans. So again, it's retrospective, so the reconfiguration has already occurred. I'm including these mostly to just show you the quality of space. So the bedrooms meet minimum sizes and all have adequate outlook and sunlight. And then this is the front elevation. So you can see the chimney that was, and then now it's reduced height. But as you can see from this photo of the row of terraces, the chimney, the terrace is sort of made up of pairings along, and it's quite common for these chimneys between the pairs to have been removed or reduced. And in fact, it's these chimneys that form part of the character of the row. So the retention of that is what makes it, sort of forms the character of the row. And we consider the removal of this chimney or reduction of it acceptable. And then this is the rear elevation, just again showing that chimney reduction. And this is the front landscaping details that I mentioned. So the site has an existing informal on-site parking arrangement, and our sort of first inclination on this application was that it should be car-free in accordance with our policies. However, in discussing with the applicant and gaining an understanding of the specific use of this HMO, in that it's run by a charity, sort of on behalf of the council for vulnerable people, there was a need for at least one on-site parking space for the manager of the charity to come onto site in emergencies in case those sort of situations arise. So in line with that, we suggested that then also a blue badge parking space be provided. And then we've imposed a condition that these 2 spaces be formally marked out prior to the continuation of the development. In addition to that, the applicant has agreed to enter into a unilateral undertaking, which will mean that residents of this HMO are no longer eligible for CPZ permits, should they wish to obtain them. And then additionally, the applicant has offered up a secure cycle storage, which will provide 10 long stay parking spaces for residents. And then we also have a Sheffield stand located here, and that will provide 2 visitor parking spaces. So the addendum that was sent out this afternoon, mostly just regarding minor corrections. However, it is worth noting that the landscaping section of the report has been altered. So we've assessed the sort of existing contribution of landscaping, and then sort of taking that on board with the scale of the proposal, considered that actually the retention of the existing landscaping would be sufficient to preserve that environment and meet policies. So then we've imposed another condition which requires that retention. So on the basis of what is recommended in the report and the balance of planning assessment, we consider that the application is acceptable in accordance with policies and should be recommended for approval, subject to conditions and a unilateral undertaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Members, any questions? Peter, I think you've got a hand up.
Well, I'll be honest, that's actually a residual hand, but in fact, I was going to ask a question. So I'm a bit scared, Claire, about what you said about we have no planning records. Now, I do understand that the use of a building is not necessarily going to be on planning records if people haven't applied for that change of use of the building. But what you said almost implied that we didn't know what had happened to the building for 20, 30 years. So can you just talk us through that? Because we don't want people to be taking the mickey out of the planning system. So why did we lose the records?
Thank you, Councillor. So to confirm, the applicant has told me that the records have basically been lost as a result of the cyber attack. As you'll be aware, we lost a lot of records. But it may be best if Gopaj, who's here to represent the applicant, could talk you through that. From our point of view, we've seen it as it was a care home. And so, yeah, we've gone on that basis and made an assessment on that basis. We've by no means said, okay, yes, you're saying that it was this use, and we've assessed it appropriately.
Gopaj, tell us the story, please.
Hi. So this property sits within the housing revenue account. So it's a site that was formerly managed historically by housing services. And as Claire's alluded to, we exhausted every avenue to try and establish some of the historic records, including entering into dialogue with housing services colleagues to establish what records they held on the site. And unfortunately, due to the cyber attack, there was no records that we could unearth relating to the historic use. Other than that, that's within the planning report as its former use as a care home. Hence the need for a retrospective planning application.
So you wanted to change the chimney size, and this flushed out the fact that all of this needed doing as well. Is that right?
First up, we've inherited this site. It's been an ongoing project for a number of years. So I couldn't answer the details around the chimney and how this planning matter arose. And I am actually just stepping in for the client department.
Okay. Claire, is that what's prompted all of this?
No, sorry, that's not what's prompted it. What's happened is the council, I believe, are changing providers in terms of who runs this HMO. So they're shifting to a new charity who have then looked at the sort of evidence in front of them and said, well, where's the lawful use?
So this is due diligence on behalf of the charity.
Correct, yes. And then unfortunately that's come about after the cyber attack. And then they have come into the planning department for advice and permission.
That makes sense. Natalie, you've got a bit to say about it. Looks of it.
Thanks, Chair. Just briefly, and just to reiterate, it's not the planning records that are missing, it's the applicant's records. So hopefully that gives Councillor Snell the reassurance he was after.
Okay, thank you very much. It sounds very straightforward as we got to the bottom of it. Sam, I saw your hand go up briefly. Is that? Can't hear you, Sam.
Just to reiterate the point that absence of planning records should preclude the termination of this application. The officer report has identified what the base use is and what the proposed use is to be assessed against, and that is
okay. So I think we all know what we're about. The proposal is, the recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to conditions and completion of a unilateral undertaking pursuant to section 106 of the Town and Country Planning Act of 1990 and other enabling powers. Who's written that one, I wonder? Okay, so all of that mouthful is what we're voting on. All those in favour, please show. Gareth.
One person, Councillor Joseph, your camera and microphone off. Are you still in the meeting?
Yes, I am. Apologies. I'm going to turn the camera on in a second.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm now going to ask each member of the committee how they voted, and I will start again at the top of my screen with the chair. Councillor Stobbs, how did you vote, please?
In favour.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bell is next. How did you vote, Councillor?
In favour.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Councillor Hanson, how did you vote?
In favour.
Thank you very much. Next on my screen, Councillor Snell. What is your vote, please?
In favour.
Thank you very much. Councillor Chowhan, what is your vote, please?
In favour.
Thank you very much. Next on my screen, on my list, is Councillor Potter. How did you vote, please, Councillor Potter?
In favour.
Thank you very much. Councillor Race, you are the penultimate councillor to vote. What is your vote, please?
Thank you. In favour.
Thank you very much. And last on my list, or on my screen, I should say, is Councillor Joseph. What is your vote, please, Councillor?
In favour.
Okay.
Thank you very much. That concludes the voting for that application.
Thank you very much, everybody. That's all of us in favour, so that was passed. Thank you very much indeed. Got one more item, item 8, delegated decisions. Please scrutinise them as you see fit. And yeah, we've got to, just to let you know, the next meeting will be on the 6th of May. Steve raised the issue of the election. And no, the 5th of May. Steve
I was about to clarify.
Issue of the election. And basically, I've been asked to have that meeting on the 5th, because if we delay it further, then we get into this problem that the government has given us, that we can't use Zoom, and it'll be all too difficult to do that the week later. So much as we might want to be out there knocking on doors, we're being asked to sit at home and do a planning meeting. So we will be here again next month. Thank you very much, everybody. Anybody else got anything to say?
I think that's the formal conclusion of the agenda, so we can probably...
Chair, are we supposed to note the delegated decisions?
Oh, yeah, I think we've
noted them.
Yeah, okay. Yes, we have now. So Mario, if you're there, I think